With all of the conflict going on across the country right now, a lot of SHTF preppers are asking themselves the question, when do I have to engage? When does conflict mean survival? Well, stick around for the rest of the video. We're going to talk about the 3 different considerations you have to make when deciding on whether or not engaging in conflict is actually going to further your chances of survival. Hey everybody, it's Magic Prepper, and today we're talking about something that is difficult to talk about at times because most of the time when it comes to SHTF prepping, your number one strategy when it comes to survival is avoidance. We do not go out of our way to jump into conflict because as somebody who's worried about survival and living for the long-term SHTF events that might occur in the future, you want to avoid any conflict that's going to bring associated risks. And when those risks are higher, your chances of survival are lower. So generally as a community, we say avoid, stay away from conflict. And on this channel, we definitely don't advocate for any kind of conflict. But with everything going on in the country and seeing this unrest occur over and over again throughout American cities, especially on our way towards November, people are starting to wonder at what point in time do they have to say enough is enough, and when do they have to engage in some sort of a conflict in order to maintain their survival for where they are. And the same concept will apply in the future if there's ever a long-term SHTF event. We're talking about grid down, societal collapse. The same concepts will apply in that moment as well, because avoidance is still key, and trying to maintain that avoidance is going to be one of the hardest parts of surviving a post-SHTF society. So if you are preparing for SHTF and you are not sure what to do about the sense of engaging in conflict in case it means whether or not you're going to survive a little bit longer, hit the subscribe button below so that we can talk about these things, because I might not know every single aspect of every single decision that everyone might have to make in their life, but you know what's best for you. And if you want to share it in the comments below, we can all talk about it to try to make ourselves more well-rounded and have a better idea of how we're going to make sure to take care of ourselves and our families when things go south. So there's 3 different considerations you have to make when it comes to the idea of engaging in conflict as being your last resort, or as being the only option that makes sense and the only option that's going to further your survival. And those 3 things are going to be situational awareness, threat assessment, and risk analysis. With those 3 considerations, you're going to use each one to develop an educated opinion on what your strategy should be when there is a threat or a perceived threat heading your way. And right now in this country, that could mean unrest and looting and riots in the street that might spill over into the suburbs, and maybe you're in a neighborhood that is starting to see some activity and you're not sure at what point you're going to have to stand your ground. And at the same time, knowing all your laws and your regulations in your area and your state and in your municipality is going to be really big while things are still up and running. But if we're talking about an SHTF grid down long-term event where without rule of laws upon us, then those same considerations should be taken in the sense of political affiliation or diplomacy when it comes to outside groups that might be in your area. So keep those things in mind, and definitely make sure you research what your legal rights are in your area for defending yourself in case you ever get to a situation like the one we're talking about now. But situational awareness is the first step to any kind of perceived threat. And what that means is that you're aware of your surroundings, you're aware of your environment, you're aware of what's happening nearby. And that's why when it comes to prepping, having comms is very important, so you can keep an eye on what's happening around you. Even if there's no power, maybe you have access to a radio and you can at least listen in to see what's happening nearby. And that's very important. And a lot of people have terrible situational awareness. SA, as it's referred to in a lot of training, is something that everybody needs to be more aware of. A lot of people don't even know what situational awareness means, and you'll see it all day long walking down the streets of America while people are in their phone with headphones on, oblivious to anything going on around them. And if there ever was even just a large-scale natural disaster like an asteroid strike or a major earthquake or a volcano or who knows what, those same people would be hit by a rock because they wouldn't even realize what's happening until it was too late. So situational awareness means making sacrifices in your life to be more aware of what's happening in your surroundings, but it also means to be aware of what's happening around you in a perimeter style fashion to know where these threats might come from and whether or not something is out of place, okay? So there's basically 4 different states of readiness for situational awareness that you have to consider and start planning for now, so that if we ever get to a situation where there is, let's say, some form of marauders and they're coming to your area, you know, how do you react to that and how do you stay aware of it before it gets to you, okay? So states of readiness include unaware. And what unaware means is you're at home, doors are locked, you're safe, everything is as usual. So you can let your guard down. You can, go to bed, you can sleep, take a nap, you can have a beer, you can relax and enjoy your TV or whatever it is you have without worrying about something calamitous happening, okay? So that's an unaware state. The next state is aware, and what that should be is you're observant of your surroundings because you're out and about. You're not in your safe zone anymore, you're not in your castle, so you have to be at least aware of what's happening around you. Maybe you're walking down the sidewalk and you notice that someone is acting suspicious behind you, or maybe you're walking down the street and you notice that that car is about to veer off the road and maybe hit you. Those are things you have to be aware of, and it's just a heightened sense of awareness of just being at least perceptive to what's happening, okay? So then after that is going to be alert, and what that means is that it's a potential threat is nearby. There is some kind of threat that you've perceived that you have to be very hyper aware of now because that threat is possibly on its way towards you. So maybe you notice somebody is armed walking down the street, and maybe you've noticed that there's a fire at a convenience store nearby. Maybe there's a group of dangerous looking people burning a car. Who knows what the perceived threat might be, but if it's near you, you have to start considering, okay, I'm on alert, I am ready to enact any kind of plan of self-defense that might occur in this moment, and I'm also aware of the threat that might occur very shortly here, and I'm gonna keep my eyes on it, and I'm gonna make sure that I don't let my sight off of whatever that perceived threat might be until I know it's either not a threat or it definitely is, okay? So the last state of readiness for situational awareness is alarm. And alarm means that you are being threatened. There is an actual threat upon you, and you have to react to it in a way that you know is going to deal with that threat. So those are the 4 states of readiness for situational awareness. So you can see why having that awareness is going to be a big factor in understanding whether or not engaging in some sort of a conflict is going to further your survival, okay? So once you have your situational awareness sealed, right? Once you have it all dealt with and you have it understood and you know how you're going to walk out your door on a daily basis and how you're going to be aware of your surroundings and whatever events might be occurring nearby, then you have to move on to threat assessment. So how do you assess a threat, okay? Because a lot of situational awareness is, basically expecting something to occur and being observant of it. But with threat assessment, you have to understand at what point is something actually a threat to your life, okay? And that's a big part of trying to make the right decisions when it comes to the possibility of engaging in conflict, okay? So you have to determine the threat level first. And what that means is the threat going to be a high risk or a low risk? Is the threat somebody wanting to break into your home and steal some of your valuables, or is the threat somebody who wants to do bodily harm to you and yours? Those are things you have to assess. You also have to assess whether or not the threat level is a group of people who've acquired a tank versus a single person who's unarmed but looking for supplies. Those are the differences you have to take into consideration in order to base a better strategy or opinion on what it is you're going to do next, okay? Then you got to understand if the risk is to your life or to your property. Because if somebody just wants to steal some food because we're in a food shortage crisis and people are becoming desperate, that doesn't give you necessarily the right or the authority to respond with any kind of lethal force, right? But if somebody is going to make an attempt on your life because they'd rather just deal with you first and then reap the rewards afterward, then that is something you have to consider and then react upon, okay? So understanding the level of risk when it comes to life versus property is going to be very important, okay? And some people might just be on a warpath, and other people might just be desperate to feed their kids, and these are things that you have to be able to consider in those moments before you decide that conflict engagement is the only route, okay? And then there's potential threat versus kinetic threat. And what that means is that maybe you've seen, let's say we're post SHTF, and there's an encampment of people who are, unsavory types nearby. But have they done anything to you or your community? Have they made any verbal threats, or have they done anything menacing? If not, then can you really say that they're an immediate threat? Probably not, but are they potential? Yes, because they're a group of people, maybe they're armed and they're an unknown, so that potentiality is still there. I'm not even sure if that's a word. Now, kinetic threat means that this threat is real and it's here at your doorstep. And what that means is maybe threats have been made. Maybe they've been verbal. Maybe there's been a message. Somebody threw a brick through your window with a note on it that says, "We're coming for you," right? Those are things that are kinetic threats. You know this threat is real and it's been put out there that these people are threatening you, okay? So that's a situation where you now have to react to it and know that, okay, this is a potential threat. We have to keep our eyes on it, keep our situational awareness up in order to understand whether or not it's going to become a kinetic threat. And then at that point, we can then move in to risk analysis. With risk analysis, what you're trying to do is you're trying to understand what is the risk versus the reward of what it is you're possibly going to do about the situation at hand, okay? So you have to decide risk versus reward in the sense of, okay, if I stay where I am and nothing happens, that's the best plan, of course. So if I'm thinking of conflict engagement, it's because there's a threat that's imminent that I have to deal with, or else it's not going to get better on its own. Now, is the risk of engaging that conflict going to be better than me just trying to leave, I guess, or trying to run away? Those are things you have to analyze, because let's say you are, for example, you're outnumbered, okay? There's 10 of them and 1 of you. And you think that if you engage in conflict, they might either leave or you might be able to handle business and not be on the receiving end of whatever it was they had planned for you. Well, that's great in theory, but an outnumbered situation generally ends with you losing. So is the risk of engaging in that conflict worth the reward when most likely you're not going to make it out of there? Okay, but if those people were to leave, and then that was it, maybe it was worth the reward. Highly unlikely, but something you have to consider, okay? And there's a few ways you can look at your risk analysis, okay? Will it never happen? Could it happen? Or is it happening, okay? So, or will it happen, like most definitely? Those are things you can look at to say, okay, so these people said they're coming to our homes to take what we have. So it's not that it will never happen, and it's not that it could happen, it's that it will happen. When, we don't know. So now we have to prepare for that, and then we have to understand, okay, so by what actions will I either receive no harm, will I receive injury, or will I perish? Those are the other 3 things you have to then mix into that equation to try to figure out what the risk is that you're attempting to work with when it comes to engaging in that conflict. And if the answer is, I will perish no matter what you do, then you probably need to get out of there and avoid it. If the answer is injury, then you have to decide risk versus reward, okay? And those are all concepts that you have to develop that all branch out from the original situational awareness you have to have, so that way you can make the most informed decision for what's happening, especially when it's around you. There's a lot of talk out there nowadays about conflict in this country, about America going into some sort of a conflict, okay? And what we're seeing in the streets right now is an escalation, which we've talked about many times on this channel, but it keeps escalating and the flames keep getting fanned because we're closer and closer to November. So we're gonna see things get worse and worse. And we just witnessed that recently, and it's gonna keep happening. So people are definitely starting to wonder, at what point do I have to take action instead of just waiting or instead of running? And those are questions that everyone has to ask themselves and decide for themselves exactly where they're going to be. But hopefully in this video, I've given you at least some things to consider before you just go out and about and start trying to find yourself in a bad situation, okay? Like I said before, there's no advocacy of conflict on this channel, because avoidance is always the number one rule to keep yourself alive and to survive longer. But there is a time where conflict might mean survival. And when you say that, the meaning behind that is, will engaging in some kind of an enemy force result in a better life or a continuance of life for you and your family? And that's what you have to consider. And that's the things that our forefathers considered during the Revolutionary War. That's the things that, you know, our grandfathers considered during World War II. What was the necessity of conflict engagement in order to maintain the lives of the people who wanted to survive, okay? And those are things that you have to consider. So SHTF prepping is about preparing for long-term SHTF events, but it's also about being prepared for right now as well. And right now this country is experiencing an uptick in street level violence that we haven't seen in a long time. And regardless of the factors that have caused it, it is here now, and we have to prepare for it the correct way. And for those of you who aren't sure exactly how to respond to some of this violence that we're seeing, you know, take all these things that we've talked about in this video into consideration so you can strategize and make the right plans for you and your family for now and for post SHTF, okay? Those are things we all have to consider, and it's hard to talk about sometimes because everybody's gonna have a different opinion on this, but this is just something I'm putting out there to try to help some of you who aren't sure develop some more strategy behind your planning, okay? So if you have any questions at all, or if you have anything else to add, leave it in the comments below. I love seeing what everybody has to say. I don't get to every single comment, but I try to read them all, and there's a lot of awesome information down there from a lot of really good people. So keep that going, please. And if you ever need anything from me, feel free to send me a contact form on my website. I'll try my best to get back to you as soon as I can, but things are very busy around here because this is not my only job. So if you have anything else to say about when conflict means survival, comments below. Otherwise, that's going to be it for Magic Prep.